Ghostly tales, yet mirrors of human life. Hey, everyone! Welcome to Encountering Chinese. Ghostly Tales from Liao Zhai. Today, I'm going to tell you two short stories. The first story is titled Evil Sorcery. In the times of the Ming Dynasty, during the reign of Emperor Chongzhen, there lived a man named Yu. Let's just call him Mr. Yu. In his youth, Mr. Yu was known for his chivalry, his sense of justice, and his passion for martial arts. He possessed incredible strength, capable of lifting a large water-filled jug with his bare hands, causing it to whirl around him like a tornado. One day, Mr. Yu found himself in the capital city, participating in the imperial examination, known as the Palace Examination. However, his joy was marred by news that his servant had fallen gravely ill, bedridden, and unable to rise. This filled him with great concern. Coincidentally, Mr. Yu heard of a skilled fortune teller in the city markets who had an uncanny ability to foretell a person's fate, including matters of life and death. Troubled by his servant's illness, Mr. Yu decided to consult this fortune teller to inquire about the prognosis of his servant's condition. Upon arriving at the fortune teller's abode, before he could utter a word, the fortune teller addressed him. "You have come to inquire about your servant's ailment, haven't you?" Mr. Yu was taken aback, but nodded in confirmation. The fortune teller continued. "Your household member is not in grave danger, but I sense perils surrounding you." Mr. Yu, now anxious, requested the fortune teller to read his own fate. After casting the divination, the fortune teller looked astonished and declared, "Within the next 3 days, you are destined to meet your demise." Mr. Yu stood there in shock, speechless for a moment. The fortune teller, undisturbed, added, "I possess a minor enchantment, and for a mere 10 taels of silver as payment, I can help you ward off the malevolent forces and dispel this impending catastrophe." Deep in thought, Mr. Yu pondered the idea that one's life and death were preordained by fate, and how could enchantment possibly alter that? Consequently, he dismissed the fortune teller's offer and rose to leave. The fortune teller shook his head, repeating, "You may regret your decision to spare these few coins. Beware, you may regret it deeply." Mr. Yu's close friends, upon hearing his predicament, expressed their concern and urged him, saying, "You should believe the words of that fortune teller. Take all your money and seek his help to avert this disaster." However, Mr. Yu remained indifferent and did not heed his friend's advice. As time passed, the third day arrived. Mr. Yu, now in a precarious state, sat quietly in his lodging, attentively observing his surroundings. The entire day passed without any sign of impending doom. As nightfall descended, Mr. Yu closed the doors and windows, lit an oil lamp, and kept his hand on his sword, sitting resolutely in the room. Even as midnight approached, there was no indication of his impending demise. He began to relax and was preparing to retire for the night when he suddenly heard a rustling sound coming from the window gap. Mr. Yu rushed over to investigate and discovered a small figure carrying a dagger axe, squeezing through the window crevice. The moment the figure touched the ground, it transformed into an adult-sized person. Mr. Yu swiftly unsheathed his sword and lunged towards the intruder with a powerful strike. However, the figure appeared ethereal, eluding Mr. Yu's attack. Realizing it couldn't contend with Mr. Yu, the figure reverted back to its small size and attempted to escape through the same window crevice it had entered. Just then, Mr. Yu quickly closed in, wielding his sword to strike down the small figure, which collapsed to the ground. When Mr. Yu illuminated the area with his lamp, he discovered that the creature was a paper man, which had been severed in half. Fearful that it might reanimate, he continued to hack at it until it was reduced to pieces. Mr. Yu dared not lie down to sleep and instead remained seated, awaiting daybreak. After a while, another creature managed to breach the window and entered the room. It had a grotesque appearance, resembling an evil spirit. As soon as it landed on the ground, Mr. Yu swiftly attacked it with his sword. He managed to cleave the creature into two parts, yet its body continued to wriggle on the ground. Fearful that it might rise again, Mr. Yu struck it repeatedly, and with each blow, the sword emitted a clear, resonating sound. When he finished, he examined the remains and found that the creature was nothing more than a clay figurine, now shattered into fragments. Mr. Yu decided to reposition himself below the window and continued to surveil the outside, closely observing the situation. After a considerable amount of time passed, Mr. Yu heard a noise outside the window, like the heavy breathing of an ox. It seemed that there was some sort of creature exerting great force, attempting to push the window frame open. The walls of the house shook incessantly, as if the entire structure might collapse under the pressure. Fearing that he might be crushed under the falling debris, Mr. Yu contemplated his options and decided it was better to confront the creature. He rushed to the door, flung it open, and dashed outside. To his astonishment, he encountered a gigantic ghostly figure. This enormous entity, as tall as the eaves of the house, appeared in the dim moonlight with a coal-black face and glowing yellow eyes. The ghost was bare-chested, unshod, wielding a bow, and arrows were tucked around its waist. As Mr. Yu stood in shock, the colossal ghost, with a menacing countenance, drew its bow and fired an arrow at him. Mr. Yu reacted swiftly, using his sword to deflect the incoming arrow, causing it to fall harmlessly to the ground. Just as he prepared to engage the ghost in combat, the ghost once again notched an arrow and released it. Mr. Yu dodged to avoid the arrow, which pierced through the wall, creating a resounding thud. The ghost, growing increasingly frustrated by its multiple missed shots, now reached for its sidearm, a large knife, and began to swing it fiercely like a gust of wind, attacking Mr. Yu. In response, Mr. Yu, displaying agility akin to an ape, skillfully parried the ghost's attacks. The ghost's powerful strike cleaved a stone in the courtyard in half. Seizing an opportune moment, Mr. Yu darted between the ghost's legs and slashed at the creature's ankle, producing a metallic clang. Enraged, the ghost roared like thunder and swung its knife down again. Mr. Yu bent down and slipped between the legs of the giant ghost. The giant ghost's sword came down, cutting through his robe. At this moment, Mr. Yu swiftly moved to the side of the giant ghost and swung his sword forcefully. As the sword struck the giant ghost, it produced a sound like clanging iron and brass. The giant ghost was pierced and fell lifeless to the ground. Mr. Yu continued to slash wildly at it, and wherever his sword struck, it produced a sound like the striking of a wooden club. Once he was sure the giant ghost was no longer moving, Mr. Yu examined it more closely by the light of the lamp. He discovered that the giant ghost was, in fact, a wooden puppet of human size, complete with a bow and arrows fastened at its waist. The puppet's face was grotesquely carved, and the areas struck by the sword were oozing with fake blood. Fearful of further apparitions, Mr. Yu lit a candle, sat down, and awaited daybreak. It was at this moment that Mr. Yu realized that the supernatural entities he had encountered during the night were all sent by the fortune teller. It appeared that the fortune teller had intended to kill Mr. Yu, using these encounters as proof of the accuracy of his divination skills. The next morning, Mr. Yu shared his harrowing experience from the previous night with all of his friends who knew about the matter. Together, they went to the fortune teller's residence. As the fortune teller saw Mr. Yu from a distance, he instantly vanished. Someone told Mr. Yu. The fortune teller has used invisibility technique, but it can be dispelled using dog's blood. Following his friend's advice, Mr. Yu prepared dog's blood and returned to confront the fortune teller. Once again, the fortune teller disappeared in the same manner as before. Mr. Yu hastily sprinkled the dog's blood over the spot where the fortune teller had stood. Suddenly, the fortune teller reappeared, his face and clothes smeared with dog's blood, making him look eerie and indistinct. The fortune teller's eyes gleamed like those of a ghost as he stood there. Mr. Yu then had the fortune teller arrested and brought before the local authorities. According to the law, the fortune teller was sentenced to death. In his concluding remarks, the author stated, "I have previously mentioned that spending money on fortune-telling is a foolish endeavor. How many people in this world can accurately predict the exact moment of a person's life or death? If divination proves ineffective, it is no different from not seeking it at all. Moreover, even if one were told their impending demise, what could they do about it? To make matters worse, there are those individuals who resort to taking lives to demonstrate their supposed divine insights. Isn't that even more terrifying?" The second story is titled Feral Dog. In the early Qing dynasty, to quell the rebellion led by Yu Qi, the Qing government carried out countless executions. One day, a villager named Li Hualong returned from hiding in the mountains and coincidentally encountered government troops marching nearby at night. He was afraid that the soldiers would kill innocent people indiscriminately, but in the midst of the chaos, he couldn't find a place to hide. In desperation, Li Hualong had no choice but to lie down among the corpses, pretending to be dead in hopes of escaping harm. After the troops had passed by, he didn't dare to stand up immediately. At this moment, he suddenly saw some decapitated and limbless bodies standing up one by one, creating a terrifying scene, resembling a forest of bodies. One of the headless bodies still had its head hanging from its shoulder, and it said, "The feral dog is coming. What should we do?" Other bodies responded in a disorganized manner. "What should we do?" Shortly after, they all suddenly collapsed to the ground again, and the surroundings became silent once more. Li Hualong was trembling with fear, trying to get up and escape. However, he suddenly noticed a creature approaching the corpses. This creature had a beast-like head but a human body. It crouched down and began gnawing on human heads, one after another, sucking out the brains from the lifeless bodies. Li Hualong was overcome with terror and decided to hide his own head under one of the corpses. After a while, the creature came closer to Li Hualong and started probing his shoulders and back, attempting to locate his head. Li Hualong struggled to burrow deeper under the pile of corpses, preventing the creature from finding his head. Nevertheless, to his horror, the creature managed to push aside the bodies covering him, exposing Li Hualong's head. In desperation, Li Hualong reached for a large stone, about the size of a bowl, which he clenched tightly in his hand. Just as the creature was about to sink its teeth into Li Hualong's head, he suddenly sprang up and shouted loudly. Li Hualong struck the creature's head with the stone, unintentionally hitting its mouth. The wounded creature screeched, sounding like an owl, and quickly retreated, leaving traces of blood on the road. Li Hualong cautiously approached the bloodstains and made a shocking discovery: 2 teeth lying on the ground. He examined them closely and noticed they were curved in the middle and had sharp ends, measuring approximately 4 inches in length. Li Hualong carefully placed the teeth in his pocket and later showed them to his neighbors, but no one could identify the creature they belonged to. Alright. That's all for today's ghostly tales. Evil sorcery and a feral dog. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Please also encourage everyone to comment and share more. We'll see you in the next episode.